Hello and welcome to Developer, the Community Events Edition. Before I start, I just want to quickly remind you about the Code of Conduct, to be aware of others, to be welcoming and respectful, be understanding of differences, be friendly and patient, be open to all questions and viewpoints, and be considerate and considerate to others. And there's a full code of conduct available on this URL. We are sponsoring the National Museum of Computing, and if you'd like to make a donation, you can do so on this URL. I'd like to say thank you to all our sponsors. Microsoft are doing some giveaways, and Black Marble have done arranged the event and have got some volunteers in as well. So thank you all. Don't forget to tweet. The hashtag's DDD2020. And the handle is Developer Day. So thank you. So thank you all for coming to my talk on accessibility from a .NET developer's perspective. I'm excited to be here, so thank you for having me. Before I start, I'd just like to introduce myself. My name's Rachel Breeze. I'm a C# developer, not a front-end developer. But having said that, I believe everyone on the team is responsible for making their websites and applications accessible, and I'll talk a bit about that in a minute or so. I'm an Umbraco MVP. Umbraco, for those people who don't know, provides a framework for building websites and web applications. It abstracts the content management away from developers, allowing us to do what we do best, build websites and applications. Umbraco is open source and utilizes the Microsoft technology stack. I'm also part of the Umbraco community accessibility team. We are helping to make the Umbraco back office more accessible, and the back office is the bit that developers use to create the relationship between code and the site or web app, and content authors use to maintain their websites and web applications. I work for Sigma Consulting Solutions Limited, a human-centered research, design and development company based in Macclesfield and with an office in Cambridge. We're 50 people in the UK, and we're owned by Sigma AB, which employs about 5,000 people worldwide. Sigma works across many sectors, including charities and public and private sector clients. One of the projects I'm involved with is We4 Authors. This is a cluster project which is funded by the European Commission, and Funka are leading the project. We4 Authors is a collaboration between different authoring tools like Umbraco, with the goal of the tools better supporting authors in creating accessible content. So today I'm going to give you a quick introduction into accessibility. I'll give you some examples of the different challenges the users who access your websites and applications may have, and some of the assistive technology they may use to overcome them. I'll also show some tools that will help with building and testing websites for accessibility. The tools will include Visual Studio, Azure Pipelines, and other development tools. I am a Visual Studio developer working in Windows and Chrome. And I'll also talk a little bit about accessibility and SEO. And as I go through the talk, I'll mention things to consider when building websites and applications and making them accessible. So the power of the web in its universality is access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. And that's what Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who's widely regarded as the founder of the World Wide Web, has described the power of the web being. The UN Convention on Rights for Persons with Disabilities recognises access to information and communication technologies, including the web, as a basic human right. So what does this mean? We should be making our websites and applications accessible and inclusive. Everyone here will use banking, utility sites, and so on. So we need to make sure that everything is accessible and inclusive so that everyone can use it. There's 14.1 million people in the UK with a disability. That's about 21% of our users. If we look at that stat another way, there's 22% of the British population, according to Optimax, who have brown eyes. Imagine excluding people with brown eyes from working with our websites and applications. The web provides a platform for equal access and equal opportunity for everyone. It can improve the usability for all. For example, the accessibility initiative in Umbraco has removed the reliance on a mouse for input, which is a key accessibility requirement, as not everyone will use a mouse for navigating a site. And the feedback from Umbraco HQ has been the keyboard navigation improvements are super helpful. even if you don't have any disabilities, as there's much fewer need to grab the mouse while doing your work, which can help a lot in productivity. Accessibility can help with SEO. There's also globally the number of people with disabilities is estimated to be over 1 billion, and they will have a spending power of more than 6 trillion. Accessibility is covered by many laws worldwide, and I've pulled a few out here for you to look at and a few key dates. But in essence, if you build a website which meets WCAG 2.1 level AA criteria, you should comply with these laws. Well, what does that mean? WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. WCAG is primarily intended to give guidance as to how websites and content should work for people with different abilities using different devices. They define how websites should be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Perceivable means information and user interface components must be presented in a way that people can perceive content. For example, provide alternative text. This allows images to be read in other forms like large print, braille, speech, and so on. Operable means making all functionality available from a keyboard and as many alternative inputs as possible. And that we should help users navigate and find content by providing consistent navigation and consistent identification of elements. Understandable means making the text readable and understandable. Text should have a reading age level of lower secondary education level. So in the UK, that's year 9. And we should also help users avoid and correct mistakes easily. And finally, robust. This means that when we write the HTML, it validates against the schema we've specified, and that it also works for current and future technologies. If we display status messages, then assistive technology gets the notification without having to focus on those messages. There's 3 levels of WCAG compliant criteria. The first level is single A, and there's 25 criteria there. And then without addressing those items, barriers exist that cannot be overcome by assistive technology, and all websites should meet single A. Double A builds on single A, and it makes websites and applications more accessible. The criteria at this level establishes a level of accessibility which should work with most assistive technology on desktops and mobile devices. There's an additional 13 criteria, meaning if you say you're AA compliant, you need to comply with 38 criteria in total. And then AAA, which is even more accessible. Some level AAA criteria cannot be applied everywhere, so we recommend meeting it where you can. And if you state that a site meets a certain level of compliance, every one of the criteria in that level must be met. The full list of criteria is available at this URL. I want to show you now why the criteria are important, and then to do that I'm going to talk about assistive technology. Assistive technology is any device, software or equipment that helps people work around the challenges, and the tech I'm going to talk about is examples of technology on the web. The reason I want to do this is I want to show you that people using websites and applications have different challenges and the types of technology they may use to overcome them. These need to be considered when designing, developing and writing contents for websites and web applications. Also, whilst I've suggested some of the technology may be used to overcome a particular challenge, its use isn't limited to that challenge. So I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to simulate dyslexia, colour blindness and visual impairments using the Silk Tide toolbar. And I'm also going to talk about hearing loss and restrictive movement. The list isn't exhaustive, and if I miss something, it's not meant to cause offence. The Silk Tide toolbar also includes stats on the impairments that we're talking about. Those stats are for the United States. First off, I'm going to talk about dyslexia, and it's estimated that 1 in every 10 people has some degree of dyslexia. And because I want to define dyslexia correctly, I'm going to quote from the British Dyslexia Association, who've adopted the following definition. Dyslexia primarily affects the skills involved in accurate, fluent word reading and spelling, and characteristic features of dyslexia are difficulties in phonological awareness, verbal memory, and verbal processing speed. The signs and symptoms of dyslexia do differ from person to person, and each individual with dyslexia will have a unique pattern of strengths and weaknesses. So I'll just demonstrate this with Silk Tide Toolbar. It's a plugin for Chrome. I'll just load here. And if I scroll down to the text, and I'll just zoom in so that you can see the text on the left of the screen. If I turn it on and you focus on the text here, you should see the letters are jumping around, and that it's you can see that reading is difficult and that it's hard to recognize the words and associate them with the correct sounds. This is called decoding, and decoding must be automatic in order for people to read fluently. And the act of decoding text word by word consumes much of the mental energy that most people are able to use for understanding what they read. And the more severe your dyslexia, so if I turn up the simulator, the harder you have to work to process content. One thing that can help people with dyslexia is the choice of fonts on websites. So as you saw, the characters flipped on the page, and if Q and P and D and B flip when it's an Arial font, they look very similar. Sans serif fonts are better, so we can see that it's easier here to differentiate the Q and the P and the D and the B in Comic Sans, but still it's still slightly hard. There's been a font specifically developed to support people with dyslexia called Open Dyslexic, and this differentiates the Q and the P and the D and the B with different endings on the vertical lines, and the characters are also weighted, so you can tell if something's flipped. You've got a reference point. And then launched this year, towards the end of this year, was Atkinson Hyperlegible, and it was developed by the Braille Institute to help people be able to read content, whatever their eyesight problems are. So this has got, again, it's got the differentiation between Q and P and D and B, but it also can help, it scales nicely, and it's easier to read if your eyesight's a bit blurry. So there's some assistive technology that may help people with dyslexia, and as with all assistive technology, there isn't one thing that helps everyone. And a couple of examples will include text-to-speech functionality, which is inbuilt in e-readers, but you can also get it in other software. And this will help people understand the material they're looking at, and so understand the material they're working with, and also help them to proofread and check their own work. And with some fonts being easier to read than others, people with dyslexia may use font changing software. So if I just pull up this news item and zoom in a bit for you, I can show Open Dyslexic font changer here. If I turn it on, you can see hopefully that the characters have completely changed on the page. And if I turn that off and show you the hyperlegible font, you can see again that the characters on the page change. And what this means is when we're testing our websites, we need to make sure that the icon font isn't used, because font changing software needs to know how to interpret the new fonts. So you should use SVGs over icon fonts. Next up, I want to talk about colour blindness. Colour blindness impacts 1 in 12 men and 1 in 200 women. That's about 3 million of the British population. You've probably all been to the opticians and I've seen this colour blindness chart. But what is colour blindness? As you're probably aware, colours are formed from red, green and blue, and we have cones in our eyes that should process those colours. If we're colourblind, our cones are either not working properly, so we have a weaker recognition of the colour in the cones, or they're not working at all, in which case we're completely colourblind. And because of the way our eyes work, there's actually 8 different types of colour blindness. And I thought I'd show you this using the iStock photo site. So you should see in front of you now a picture with 6 birds on it, and there's 3 I'd like you to focus on. The blue tit, which has a blue head and a blue tail and a yellow belly, and the bullfinch, which has a red belly, and the northern cardinal, which has a red belly and a red back. If I turn on the Silk Tide simulator and simulate colour blindness. That, as you can see, there's a lot to show, so I'm only going to go through a few different ones. So if we filter out the red so it appears weak, the colours have gone slightly browner, and if it's greatly reduced, to me the colours go greener. And if I make the blue greatly reduced, you can see that it's filtered out the blue on the blue tit's head and tail, and also on the belly. And then if we reduce the colour completely, you can see that it goes grey. It's important to note that colourblind people can still perceive contrasts as well as differences in hue, saturation and brightness, and many colourblind individuals report being able to better distinguish between bright colours rather than dim ones. So these are a couple of the reasons we need to consider contrast and colour when we're designing websites. Don't forget that colour alone can't be used to infer meaning, because not only can colourblind people not see it, blind people can't see colours as well. So we can't just use the colour red for stop and the colour green for go, for example. Also, don't forget that considering contrast also has the impact of helping people who are accessing content on their mobile phones and laptops and so on in bright conditions where contrast is lower. Next up, I want to show you a real-world example of the impact of our colour choices for people with colour blindness. You might remember a small event back in 2018 called the Football World Cup. And there were a number of games which some colourblind fans could not follow, such as South Korea v Germany and Saudi Arabia v Russia. And this is because the teams played in red and green kits. On the left, I've got a picture of one of the games where one of the players is wearing a green kit, the player in the middle is wearing a red kit, and then the player on the right is wearing a green kit. And this picture on the right shows the same picture but with colourblind filters applied, so you can see that the players all look the same colour and the grass is the same colour as the players. It's estimated that 320 million people are colourblind worldwide, and almost half the planet were projected to have watched the World Cup. So a lot of people were furious about the colour choices for the kits. Visual impairments impact about 350,000 people in the UK. They're both blind and partially sighted, and they will have different types of visual impairments. I'm going to describe a few to you here. So first off, I want to talk about cataracts, and you should see the text now on the left is blurred, and a cataract is the clouding of the normally clear lens of your eye. The NHS website describes the process of age-related cataract growth as follows. When we're young, our lenses are usually clear like glass, allowing us to see through them. As we get older, they start to become frosted like bathroom glass and begin to limit our vision. Cataracts often develop slowly and can affect one or both eyes. Symptoms may include faded colours, blurry or double vision, halos around light, and trouble with bright lights and trouble seeing at night. Next up, I want to talk about tunnel vision. So there's two types of tunnel vision, loss of peripheral vision and loss of central vision. Loss of peripheral vision is the loss of the vision around the edges of the visual field, shown here. Peripheral vision loss may mean content on the edge of your page is missed, as shown here, and users will have to turn their head to see that content. Loss of peripheral vision is normally associated with glaucoma. This is a condition that damages your eye's optic nerve, and it gets worse over time. Loss of central vision is the loss of the vision in the middle of your eye. Loss of central vision means that you can't see directly ahead of you, as shown here. And it means that users have to work hard to view the content in the middle of the page. Loss of central vision is normally associated with age-related macular degeneration. And it's important to say that the different impairments can, you can have multiple impairments, so you could have cataracts and tunnel vision. One of the items missing from the simulator is diabetic retinopathy, and this is an eye condition that causes changes to the blood vessels in the retina. If you look at the picture on the left and this top retina here, you can see that the retina is the membrane that covers the back of the eye. It's highly sensitive to light and covers any and converts any light that hits the eye into signals that can be interpreted by the brain. Illustrated underneath is diabetic retinopathy. This shows damages to the blood vessels within the retinal tissue, causing them to leak and fluid and distort vision. And this picture on the right here shows as a simulation of distorted vision due to diabetic retinopathy. It usually affects both eyes, and when left untreated, diabetic retinopathy can scar and damage your retina. And it's the most common cause of vision loss for people with diabetes. So there's various assistive technology available for people with visual impairments. People may use smartphones, which have opened up a whole range of possibilities, and they can help people recognize money, identify colors, scan barcodes, and read product information, and help them navigate in cities, as well as having some of the settings I'm going to show you now for Windows. There are other operating systems available, and they also have similar settings too. So I'll just load the ease of access settings for Windows and just talk you through a few of them. So as you can see, Windows has got a lot of accessibility settings within it, and you can change the display, the mouse pointer, colors and contrast and so on. So if we just look at the display and focus on the text here, we can make the whole text on our screen bigger, or we can make the whole screen bigger, and this obviously helps people who are partially sighted and blind. We can change the mouse pointer size, making it easier to locate the mouse pointer on the screen, and we can also change the color. We can change the size of the text cursor, making it easier to find that on the screen. And again, we can change the color. We can also change the thickness of the cursor. There's magnification software that will help you zoom in, and we can apply color filters. And color filters can help people who've been diagnosed with color blindness. So we can change the colors down here, but we can also change the colors using grayscale, turn them into grayscale and so on. And this may help people with dyslexia, and it may also help people who've got photophobia, so they get headaches and things as a reaction to light. We can apply contrast, we can change the contrast, and there's a whole wad of settings for you to look at there. One of the ones you might all find useful is the night light, which isn't in accessibility settings, but this will then start to filter out the blue light as we go the evening, and that will help you get to sleep at night. There's also other types of assistive technology available for people who are blind and partially sighted. We have the Braille Display, an illustration of which is here, and this is a keyboard-like device that translates the text on the screen into Braille and enables blind or deaf-blind people to read the text using their fingers. And there's also screen readers and magnification software. Before I demo a screen reader and zoom text magnification software to you, I want to take you through a number of things that should be developed to help with accessibility and also make the pages user-friendly. To help with this, I'm going to use both the BBC Sports site and the BBC News site. So when we look at this, we can see when we navigate through the BBC Sports site, we can see the menu is consistent. And we can also see when we click through from the menu, there's a list of child pages that is always the same as well. Sorry, we can see that the pages here are the same. And when we click through to look at an article, the page itself has got 2/3, 1/3, with the first 2/3 about the article and the 1/3 on the right about the top stories in this case. And this is important because it means a user doesn't have to work hard to learn your sight. The next thing we can see is if we tab through the page, tab ordering is consistent, and we can see where we are as well. So if I just show you a page where you can't see where you are, you can see the difference. So I've tabbed onto through. If you watch the bottom left of the screen down here as I tab, you can see that I am tabbing through the page, but there's no reference point as to where I've gone. And even on sites where we do have a reference point, the tab order does need to be consistent. So if you can see as I go through, it starts off very consistent on this site. Go to the picture here, the main banner, and I would expect it to go, the tab next to the Read.FAQ actually goes down to Buy Cinema. So it needs to be consistent ordering for the tab order. Next, if we look at the source of this page here, you see a few things. You can see the document type is set. This document type is for HTML5, and this is important because we need to make sure that we write the correct HTML for the schema, and that the HTML validates against the schema, so that assistive technology knows how to parse the page. We've also set here, BBC have also set here the natural language of the page, and this is important so that assistive technology knows how to pronounce the text on the page. We scroll right a little bit, you can see there's a title in there, and the title has got the page article first and then the brand name. And this is important because users will probably know they're on your site, but not necessarily know what page they are on your site. Also notice that the separation between the article and the title is a dash, not a pipe, because screen readers do read out pipes as a part of the text, and it can interrupt the flow. So now I'm going to demonstrate NVDA to you. There are other screen readers available. When I launch it, it's going to read out the title of the page, and then it will read out what I hover on below the mouse, and then I'm going to tab through the menu, and then I'll turn off NVDA. So NVDA is already installed on my computer, so you should be able to hear that.
Well, okay. Maria Carey's All I Want for Christmas tops the UK charts after 26 years. BBC News, Google Chrome, Maria Carey and Santa Claus. Completing a journey 26 years in the making. Address and Maria Carey. List with 2 items. Skip to content link. Accessibility help link. List with 11 items. Sign in link. Notifications link. Home visited link. News visited link. Sport visited link. Illustrate. Speaks panel.
So what you should have seen there, heard there rather, was that we listen to the page at talking speed. A lot of screen reader users will listen to it quicker. And when we tab through the menu, it got quite arduous. So this is why the BBC and other sites use the skip links, because it means you can skip the menu and go straight to the content on the page. And this is one of the other reasons we need the menu to be consistent, because once you've learnt the menu structure, you can just skip content. Next off, screen readers aren't just about reading out the content on the page, they'll also parse the content on the page and pull out the elements. So this shows why the markup needs to be validated. Now you can see it's pulled out links, headings, form fields, buttons and landmarks. And this shows why interaction should really only be defined on links and form fields and buttons, because that's all that screen readers can trigger and assistive technology can trigger. You can obviously if put a JavaScript action on a div, but that won't be picked up by a screen reader. But if you do put it on a div or a span or something like that, you should make sure that it's keyboard accessible. Next up, if we look at what the elements list is pulled out a list of the links on the page, and a screen reader user can hear the links, move to those links to get more context about it, or activate the link, and all the links are labeled really well. If we go to this site and pull up the screen reader, we can see that the links aren't clear. So if I was a screen reader user, I wouldn't know where I was going to. Working with assistive technology is really hard and really tiring. So as someone who's using assistive technology, I probably wouldn't interact with this page just because it's a lot of work to work with it. If we go back here, we can then see the headings have been pulled out. Now headings are only a requirement for WCAG level AAA. However, the WebAIM 2017 survey tells us that navigating via headings is the most important way people who rely on assistive technology locate information. Also, dividing content up into chunks makes it easier for everyone to understand, retain, and reference. And we can see that we structure the page with a H1, which is the most important item on the page, and then we go to H2 and H3, so it's a consecutive ordering. You shouldn't really skip consecutive heading levels going down the headings, but you may coming back up. Should not put more than one H1 on a page because not all assistive technology can read it. There's also form fields and buttons and landmarks that get pulled out into assistive technology. Next up, I want to talk about magnification software. Now, if you hold the control and use the scroll wheel on your mouse, this is not magnifying the page. This is just proving the website is responsive. Magnification software such as Zoom Text only increases the text on the page, leaves the picture size alone. To be compliant, you need to be able to zoom in to 200% of the size of the text without impacting the layout on the page. If we look at a site here, which also has Zoom Text, where we turn on the Zoom Text, we can see as we zoom in that the buttons start to bleed into the next boxes. And then if I scroll down a bit further, you'll see that the text has bled out of the box and into the page, and it becomes illegible. And we haven't hit 200% there, so that's not compliant. So I mentioned that we need to have the natural language set on the page correctly in order for assistive technology to be able to parse it and pronounce it. I just wanted to show you this.
Accessibility demo. How a screen reader sounds when you don't define the language attribute in your HTML. Example with quote lang quote attribute defined as quote pt-br quote for Brazilian Portuguese on site.
Tab. Cursos da Teca Assistiva link. Tab. Todos os cursos link. Tab. Sobre Teca Assistiva link. Tab. Acessibilidade link. Tab. Cadastrar link. Tab. Entrar link.
Example without quote lang quote attribute defined, which defaults to English.
Tab.
Cursos.tech assistive link.
Tab.
Todos os cursos link.
Tab.
Sobre Tech assistive link.
Tab.
Accessibility link.
Tab.
So hopefully you heard there that if we don't set the language attribute correctly on the page, the content becomes illegible. Next up, I want to talk about hearing loss, and there's about 9 million people in the UK who are deaf and hard of hearing, and they need to be able to understand the multimedia content we upload to the web. And this is really important with people uploading more and more videos to YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and so on. So we need to upload the videos with captions and transcripts. Captioning doesn't just help people who are deaf or hard of hearing. 80% of the people who use captions aren't deaf or hard of hearing, and 1 in 3 people will have captions on in a public setting. But we can't always rely on auto captioning to convey meaning. I've got 2 screenshots here from a YouTube video about Umbraco Cloud. The top screenshot shows the captions that have been applied manually, and it says the types of sites we use Umbraco Cloud for. And the bottom picture shows auto captioning from YouTube, and it says of sites we use in Brockville code for. You add captions to help with SEO as well as to help with assistive technology, but Google recognizes that its own caption is so bad it won't include auto captions when it's working out reading them for SEO purposes. So adding your own captions makes it more accessible and also helps with SEO. When we upload content, we need to check the captions, and if they don't apply our don't convey the correct meaning. We need to apply our own, as I've just shown. We also need to check colour contrast if we apply our own, because it's not always the best. Otherwise, not everyone is able to perceive and understand the content. And when uploading multimedia, we should always give users the option to start, stop, pause, rewind, and fast forward content. This gives them the chance to pause and process the content being displayed, and it really helps people who are using captions and can't read as fast as they're being presented. Whilst we're talking about videos, those that load as soon as you access a page can be really distracting, especially for people with cognitive impairments, and can impede their ability to concentrate. And if you're using a screen reader and have an auto-playing video which plays sound, it makes the page impossible to use. When we're using video conferencing software, always pick software that supports captions, and this will help people who are deaf and hard of hearing, and also people who are in a noisy environment. We've done this with a click of a button, and it's helped one of our deaf colleagues remain part of the team. Auto-captioning relies on speech recognition software to convert speech to text. And not only does this help people who are deaf, as shown in the previous slide, it can also help people with the dictation of notes, and therefore help people with dyslexia write without worrying about spelling. There's other types of assistive technology available for people who might have restricted movements. So there's a switch, head pointer, eye tracking software, and a head mouse. Stephen Hawking, who had ALS, also known as MND or motor neuron disease, used a single switch device when he lost his ability to communicate with his voice. And then you used eye tracking software when he lost the ability to use his hands. So it's really important when developing websites and web applications that we consider all input devices, not just the mouse, and consider the different types of challenges users who may have when they're accessing them. Really quick overview now into how the things we talked about overlap with SEO. First off, the title tag. Not only does it help people know where they are on your site, it helps users of search engines know where the link they're about to click will take them. And it also provides context to the search engine when the site is being crawled. In search engine optimization, there's a lot of focus on the H1 tag and less so on the nested H2 to H6 headings. This is because the H1 tag indicates the main topic of a page, whilst H2 to H indicate subtopics. Don't use more than one H1 heading. Although HTML5 does allow it, it's not well supported by browsers and assistive or technology. HTML5 introduced more detailed tagging of elements such as article, section, and so on, and these do help some screen readers and assistive technology better understand the content, and also helps search engines understand the markup. There are times when content is put on the page, such as infographics or memes, that people can see, but that a bot or assistive technology can't. So here we need to provide text that screen readers and bots can use for information and context, and we can either have that visible or hidden. Google does give less weight to hidden text to avoid keyword stuffing. And as we've talked about, videos, captions and transcripts will help with SEO because AI isn't yet good enough to parse videos to get the content out. But as I said, Google will ignore its own captions where they've been added using auto captionings because of the inaccuracy ratings. And now I'm going to talk quickly about some tools that can be used to help for testing for accessibility. Most of the automated tools utilize AxeCore at their heart. AxeCore is an open source project that's aim is to return 0 false positives. So first off, in Visual Studio, we have an extension called the Web Accessibility Checker, and you can either install that by itself or install it with the Web Essentials pack. The Web Essentials extension comes with 15 other plugins, including package security alerts, which you might find helpful for your development. So I've got an example here. So I've got the extension for checking accessibility already installed. To run it, you load the HTML and click validate, and that will then return any errors for that particular page. Whilst that's handy, that's probably not how anyone here develops. You probably pull content and pages together dynamically. So to use it at runtime, you use it through IIS Express. It won't work on your local IIS environment, and you can then use Browser Link to check it. I'm just demoing this using a starter kit provided by Paul Seal, and he is aware of the accessibility issues. So if I just move that out to the side and pull up the error list, you can see, because I've got it validating on page load, you can see the accessibility errors now that it's found. And if I navigate to another page within here, the accessibility checker will auto run and then play back the errors back in Visual Studio for that page underneath. So that will help. And then you can also run the web accessibility checker through the browser link and run it on all browsers, or you can use the Chrome extension here to run the accessibility checker and report back to Visual Studio. So that's a nice way of testing, but obviously that's only in your dev environment. That doesn't help once you start to go into the build and deployment process. Here we can use accessibility checking in Azure DevOps. There's a task you can add to your build pipeline called the accessibility checker, and you should run this after the web app has been deployed, and you configure the URL that should be tested along with any accessibility testing levels you want to apply. And this will report on a list of errors on the page is that you set it for. I know as devs we tend to play with technology before we've read the instructions, but in this case it's worth reading the instructions on how to configure the checker, as you'll need to install it on a virtual machine and have the Azure DevOps agent on there, as well as Firefox, Gecko driver and Node.js. And whilst it feels like an easy option to configure once you've got the prerequisites installed, and if you have a virtual machine, my first test failed because it doesn't work with iframes, and also you do need to configure this to run on a page at a time. Another option is to build accessibility testing into your pipeline using automated front-end testing. So for example, the task Axe will integrate with Selenium and C#, or Selenium and TypeScript and JavaScript, and run it as part of your Azure build pipelines, or you can use Cypress.io. In all honesty, I'm still investigating those. Next up, there are some Chrome extensions that you can use as part of your testing process to make sure that everything is accessible. So you can run the contrast checker. So if I just show you that now, it lets you pick the color to test. So I've picked the background color there, and you can compare it to a front end color. And then here it tells you on the left hand side at the bottom whether the color combination is AA and AAA compliant. You can also use the Wave Essentials plugin. And this web accessibility evaluation toolkit will then report on the errors on the page. You can get the details of those errors, and then you can also find out why it's important to fix the errors. And one of the nice things about this is you can turn the styles off and see the errors even easier. And then the next thing we can use is the Chrome DevTools. So if I just open an incognito window and load up a website, Chrome DevTools is found in More Tools and Developer Tools. And the tools we're going to look at are the Lighthouse tools, and you can run an accessibility report on your page. Click Generate Report, and then it uses Lighthouse to run a score and to tell you about all the issues on that page. And this too uses Axe Core under the hood. The reason we do it in incognito mode is because other tools can get in the way, or especially particularly with speed tests and so on. None of the tools I've shown are a replacement for manual testing, and only when those tools are passed should manual testing start. As Manuel Muchovitz says, if a site is reporting as 100% accessibility, it means we've laid the groundwork for testing. He has written a great article called Building the Most Inaccessible Site Possible with a Perfect Lighthouse Score. We should ensure accessibility from the start. And the Web Experience Toolkit has explored the different roles involved in building websites and applications, and has broken the roles into the different criteria that are available, and saying who's responsible for making sure which criteria apply. So as you can see, everyone's responsible for making the project accessible and a success. In summary, developed the right way, the internet provides equality of opportunity and social inclusion for everyone. For people without disabilities, technology makes things easier. For people with disabilities, technology makes things possible. So I'd just like to say thank you to some people who've helped, say hey to the back office accessibility team, and that is it from me. Thank you.